Yeah, I know. That's blood. That's not there. I know.
We are now live and recording. It's not 8 o'clock. It's much late. Nothing to wait. So now I'm going to start.
Hey, Corey.
That's because he's
Standing up tomorrow.
he behaves himself when he sits up front.
I've never seen it that bad. 2 or 3.
Called to order this regular July scheduled meeting of the Huron City Schools Board of Education, regular and live streamed, recorded meeting. Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mrs. Green.
Here.
Mrs. Mast.
Here.
Mr. Slocum. Here. Mr. Ward.
Here. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3, approval of agenda. We have a
Second.
treasurer.
Mrs. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Slocum.
Yes.
Mrs. Mast.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 4 on the agenda, approval of minutes.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Mast.
Yes.
Mr. Slocum.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. At this time, we'll allow time for audience participation. We allow a maximum of 30 minutes of the meeting dedicated for participation. Individuals would please rise, say their name and address, and please say it slowly so our treasurer can record it. And
You step up to the left.
please step up to the lectern, and please 5 minutes maximum, but a reminder that it's 30 minutes total. So if you could be generous with your fellow residents, I'm sure they would be grateful. Would anyone like to address the Board of Education at this time?
Hello, my name is Amy Springer. I'm the Huron Athletic Research Club president. My address is 434 Seneca. I'm just here for a couple things, just to keep you guys up to speed. Everybody in Huron has received this in the mail. This is our membership drive flyer. It has everything you need to know about athletics, schedules, 3 things coming up. Right now, we are starting our press box renovation. Carpet is going in next week. Countertops are already done. We have a huge lift. Thank you to the school for providing that huge lift to get these painting done. It should be done by the end of the week. It's going to look fantastic. We will eventually get signage on the back that faces the highway. I just waiting on details for that. That's the press box. Stadium cleanup. Let me jump forward. Membership drive is this Saturday. It's from 10 to 12. That is where our student athletes will go around, high school athletes will go around to our neighborhoods and ask for a donation. If you see them, just, some of these kids are freshmen, they've never done this before, so they're going to get stuck, they don't know what to do. And it's a really great way for them, for team bonding. So that's this Saturday. We do donuts and chocolate milk, and we do lunch at the stadium as well. It's a really fun event to do for the kids. Especially we didn't get to do it last year. So that is Saturday. Our stadium cleanup day is the following Saturday, the 31st. We already kind of got started underway on that last night. Trimming and mulching will be done next Saturday. Any community members, we always welcome to help. So anyway, that's all I have. I just want to kind of give everybody updated. The last thing. Our advertising and our membership drive is doing very, very well. I'm super excited. We got some new companies that are interested. We have stadium signage along the fence that will go out in August. So I'm just really happy to know that our community is supporting us and it's been going really, really well. So it's all good news. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Allendor. I live at 414 Dockley Drive. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I just have a few questions about the professional development course that was offered last month to administration, and then I think again to teachers just recently. Coach Julie McDonald, the curriculum director, and she informed me we would be using the Safe Zone project. My first question is why wasn't this listed in the agenda last month or in the meeting minutes? We went through it a couple different times. You guys discussed it after our group that was here last month left.
This isn't a back and forth. You have an opportunity to address the board. I would encourage you to email superintendent, curriculum director.
So I guess these are just rhetorical questions. And I just wonder if you guys know very much about the Safe Zone project. Did you look into it? You guys were the ones that approved it. I don't really know how it works, how professional developments get approved. If you're endorsing it and supporting this training. After I found out about it, I really dug into the history of it and the founders and what it is at its core. The founders are very, 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 they're for defunding the police. They're all about white privilege. They're very anti-Christian and Christian privilege. This program trains teachers to acknowledge and investigate heterosexual privilege. I just am curious about how this is going to impact our kids. Would it not be irresponsible to push involuntary promotion of gender confusion in a public education setting? And at worst, is this actually damaging to kids who are still developing? Isn't it the parents' job to help their child through a life-changing event like that? My next question is, what happens to teachers or students who refuse to go against these beliefs and do not honor transgender names or pronouns? Or Christian students who are forced to go against their own beliefs? Julie told me on the phone last month that you would, as a school, agree to call students whatever name they chose. She also told me if you want our kids to learn about traditional marriage in a roundabout way, that they should just go to St. Pete's and not here. My question is why is it being taught to them at all in a public school? We've already seen in Virginia, for example, a teacher who was fired over this, and students being threatened with bad grades, and one even being sent to a small holding space in the classroom all day because they wouldn't do this. This about discrimination. This also is clearly trained to teach that gender is fluid. How does this play out in the school? Apparently, state education officials are not including kids' bodily safety and privacy into their definition of safe for all. Because according to this policy, schools must allow boys identified as girls, for instance, to use the girls' bathroom or change in female locker rooms. This can all be done without ever notifying parents. Sadly, no one ever talks about the harm done to very young girls, for example, who feel powerless to respect physical privacy in the presence of biological males. Not to mention young men who don't want to change in front of biological girls. I feel like this is a whole other lawsuit issue waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, my name is Lindsay Cousins. My address is 711 Meadowlark. I am a former school teacher and the mother of two. I'm here today because I am absolutely alarmed by the radical agendas that are sweeping through our nation's schools. I want to make sure that children of Huron are protected. I will be addressing the dangers of critical race theory, the Safe Zone project, and COVID-19 mandate. The major problem is that many people do not know what critical race theory is or what comprehensive sex education or social emotional learning are because they sound good or they are disguised by other names. For example, CRT is also under the guise of many other names such as equity, diversity, and inclusion, which sounds wonderful. People think it's part of the civil rights movement, but it is the exact opposite. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." CRT seeks to judge people by the color of their skin and is overtly racist. It seeks to separate and divide our nation into groups based on race and then by oppressors versus victims. Children are being taught that they are either an oppressor or a victim solely based on their skin color and gender. This is insanity. Does racism exist in the United States? Yes. Is it wrong? Absolutely. But we cannot fight racism with racism, which is exactly the Marxist strategy of critical race theory. We need to stop this indoctrination and implement curriculums that focus on the building up of one's character and moral responsibility and duty of being a good neighbor and citizen. Recently, I looked into the Safe Zone project that was offered as teacher training to our Huron school teachers. The titles of some of the resources alone reveal how radical this training is, and I do not want it offered as professional development for Huron teachers or staff. It is anti-American, anti-traditional family, anti-Christian, anti-white male, and so on. It pretends to teach quote-unquote tolerance, but it is very much intolerant at its core. Furthermore, the LGBTQIA movement behind the Safe Zone project has a set of beliefs, making it a modern-day religion. I do not want their belief system to be forced upon my children or anyone else's children. It is the responsibility of individual families to teach their children about sex, development, and their emotions. Comprehensive sex education, CSE, social emotional learning, SEL, have no place in schools as it sexualizes children. Our children have a legal right to an academic education that protects their innocence, free from comprehensive sexuality education and radical indoctrination. Finally, I want to make it clear that we need to protect our children from the autocratic movement that they must be vaccinated for COVID-19 or else they'll face discrimination in schools by being required to wear a pointless mask. The COVID-19 vaccine is not even a vaccine by the FDA's very own definition of the word. It is an experimental biological agent, and it has not gone through the rigorous testing process all other vaccines undergo to be approved as safe. Vaccinations, and again, this is not a vaccination, cannot be deemed safe in the experimental stage. If the FDA succumbs to the pressures of approving this vaccination, it is still experimental. We simply do not have long-term data on the side effects, especially for developing bodies and pregnant women. Our children should not be forced to be guinea pigs in the greatest science experiment in history. It is the individual family's right, not the government's, to decide what is appropriate for their children. The true pandemic is not the pandemic of the unvaccinated, but the pandemic of medical censorship and coercion. Anyone who follows the data knows who the vulnerable are and how to protect them. We know children are not the super spreaders. We know masks can't stop the virus. We know that long-term use of masking is physically, socially, and emotionally harmful to children. We know that kids have a 99.99% survival rate. We know that there are safe and effective medicines to treat COVID-19 at its early stages of viral progression. It's time for local bodies of government, including public schools, to simply use common sense. Listen, my son came home from school every day with a headache because of the amount of CO2 he was breathing in from being forced to wear a mask. My daughter entered Huron schools for the first time last semester and couldn't even see the faces of her teachers. My children will not be forced to wear masks ever again, and they will not be discriminated against. I'm asking the school board to be courageous and stand up against medical mandates and to protect medical autonomy for our families. Be aware, several lawsuits are springing up all over the nation against school districts and school boards who are implementing CRT, CSE, SEL, and the forcing of COVID-19 vaccination and masking of students. The only way to keep our students physically, emotionally, and socially safe in our schools is to stop the radicalization of our public educational system. I would like to know the school board's position on these issues. My final plea is actually to our parents. It is time, more than ever, to know what is going on in our schools, to investigate teacher training, to know what is being taught to our children, and to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Anyone else like to address the board at this time?
Good morning to the members of the school board. It's good to see you all again. My name is Ryan Hathaway. I'm a resident at 536 Snowy Egret Drive. I'm a proud father of two, soon to be three. I'm here today to continue, like these other parents, to fight for our children and ensure that our schools remain a place of true education, not indoctrination. I wanted to follow up on what has already been discussed, as there has been an increasing concern across our country regarding the LGBTQ plus movement and push for these ideologies on our children. We've already heard a lot this morning about the recent professional development through the Safe Zone project. I won't repeat everything that's been said, except to strongly emphasize how much I agree with these concerns. I'm curious who approved this training. Again, I don't know the channels that this has to go through. I hope that you guys were not aware of kind of the background behind this project We did look into this, and from the outside, although it looks inclusive and well-intentioned, it's alarming that anything was used for this group. So I want to share a few titles of some other trainings that just one of the founders come up with. This guy's name is Sam Killerman. He's the founder of the Safe Zone Project. Here are a couple of his titles. The genderbread person. Not ginger, genderbread. My first version of this tasty little guide to gender. It presents gender on 3 different continuums. One for identity, expression, and biological sex. So that's one of these fellows. 30 examples of Christian privilege. If you're a Christian in the US, these are a bunch of unearned benefits you get that members of other faiths do not. 30 plus examples of masculine dude bro privilege. How to engage with people who are stubbornly stuck on all lives matter. 15 plus fantastic resources for talking about homosexuality and the Bible. 30 plus examples of Christian privilege. 30 plus examples of cisgender privilege, which if you don't know what that is, I had to Google it. It's this idea that you actually identify with the gender you were born with. 30 plus examples of heterosexual privilege, 30 examples of male privilege, and 5 reasons why so many people believe feminism hates men and why they're not true. So these are just a few. There's a big list here. So I'd like to close with some quick stats around this topic, LGBTQ plus in general. Did you know that less than 1% of our population identify as transgender? Only 4.5% of American adults identify as LGBTQ. Yet there seems to be a push nationwide to transform our entire education system to reach our children about gender identity and sexual orientation as early as kindergarten. All of this for 4.5% of the population, which allegedly feel more inclusive. Why are we applying a minority view to the majority? And why is it in our schools? I am the one who will be teaching my child about sexuality. Traditional and biblical marriage between a man and woman isn't a concept that we should have to go to a Christian school to be taught. My daughter's 5. She's going into kindergarten this year. What happens if her teachers tell her that it's okay for a girl to marry a girl and a boy to marry a boy? Not only does this confuse the 5-year-old, but that's something that should be taught at home. We pay the teachers to educate our children, not indoctrinate them. Our job, that's not what we pay our teachers to do. I'll close with this. Last month, a comment was made following the critical race theory topic that was brought up by a few concerned parents. The comment was, what has been said to make you think that this is taking place at Huron? This is so far away from Huron. At that time, my answer was, is it though? Little did we know that this training was being discussed. So my question is, I can follow up with email. Do you even know what percentage of your students in Huron identify as LGBTQ+? Will you stand up and defend the emotional and physical needs of the 96% that make up the Christian, straight, white, male, cisgender? Or are we going to continue to focus on race and sex and focus on equity instead of equality? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your contribution. Would anyone else like to address the board at this time?
Good morning. This is the first board meeting that I've had a chance to be at after having been 15 years as a superintendent over at Winderley and Double S Industries. And I just want to thank the board members because I know the effort that the board members made.
Pardon me, sir. Pardon me for interrupting. Please state your name and address. Certainly.
Stephen Lippert, My address is 3601 Songwood Circle. We are part of the Huron school system.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm appreciative of the board members and the time they're putting in and the effort they're putting in. I'm also appreciative of the heritage that the Huron schools has had with its community. And the link with that heritage is for them to recognize the value and the importance of the parents and how invaluable a parent is. So often a school teacher is saying, wow, what a wonderful job is being done at this home. I wish all of my students had a parent like this. And so for the parents that are here, thank you. How many parents does one get at a board meeting? No, a bunch right now, yes. But thank you, thank you, thank you. And the beautiful thing about it is they're sharing what's in their heart. They're sharing concerns about their kids. I'm not as sophisticated. I have a couple items to mention. It's my prayer that the COVID shots, and I don't know the history and haven't seen your minutes or realized what decisions have been made. It's my prayer that the COVID shots would not be something required by the board. First of all, as a mathematician, I'm not, but I do understand what 99.997 means when it says, even when a child gets COVID or this group, young group age get the COVID disease, that's the percentage rate of those who survive. And if that's the case, why are shots even being considered for kids? I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And my personal concern is when one is dealing with RMA of an individual child, and we don't know quite yet what that's going to mean. Wow. My second point is, and I think it's already been addressed, and probably in the previous meeting too, critical race theory. My goodness. My Christian faith has supported me well. My Christian faith tells me that every child in this school is precious. Everyone. It doesn't matter what their background, doesn't matter what their family is. Everyone has God's fingerprint on them. And so with that in mind, and seeing the plan where God is using his family to be the first educator in the school, to be the second educator, the wonderful mesh that Huron Schools has with their parents. Amen. How important that is. And my final item is, I hope that the school district would make available the access to the Huron School libraries so that we can see the books that our kids are able to check out. I won't say any more now, but the Florida Alliance has done a monitoring of books in the school library, and it's been a very useful and helpful thing. Thank you for your time.
I'm really brief, I guess. Jack Lenzik, LENCZYK, 8918 Ludwig Road, Huron, Ohio. And I guess where I'm coming from, last night I was looking at the sports schedule for soccer, so we're getting away from a lot of the other things. And I noticed that only 2 of the boys' soccer games were scheduled to be at the stadium. I looked at the girls' schedule, and only 2 of the girls' games were scheduled to be at the stadium. So out of 9 home games, 2 were at the stadium. For the girls, out of 8 games, 2 were at the stadium. And speaking with Mr. Lamb earlier, that may be updated up to 4 or something like that. But I'm just speaking for a lot of soccer parents, I guess, saying that I don't understand why all of the soccer games can't be played at the stadium. It's a great facility. Other schools do it. Perkins not only does football, girls soccer, boys soccer, they also do St. Mary's football games. And so it seems like it's something that could be done. Student athletes really want to play in the stadium. So I just wanted to bring it up to attention. There might be other people to follow up with on it. And also in light of last fall with COVID restrictions, spectating was limited by the number of stands, and the difference between McCormick and the stadium is, I don't know what it is exactly, but at least 10 times. I'd hate to see something where parents can't go to soccer games this fall if something were a second wave of COVID or restrictions come back or something like that. We've got the stadium there that can accommodate all the seating there, so I'd hate to see that happen. We got for the boys team, there's 10 senior boys on the team, and I'd hate to see it where their parents can't attend games or something because we're limited by capacity. All I have.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. For 17 Acres Circle. I just wanted to address really quickly, actually Jack kind of mentioned it. It seems so lovely now in the middle of July. It seems like I'm beating a dead horse a little bit because no one's masking and everyone's out enjoying their lives, but the Delta variant is being really magnified in the news. And I feel like we are following a blueprint, quite frankly, of last summer. If you look at the narrative that was happening then, they were setting up, the news, the media was really setting up this fear going into the fall about children. And that's kind of what they've been focusing on in the news with the Delta variant, that the children are the ones that are being more affected and they're spreading it. And that's just not true if you dig into it. So I know that we are local choice as school boards and school entities. A lot of schools are going proactively to choice masking in the fall, and I'm wondering if we can maybe start having that conversation proactively instead of waiting to react to what the health department and the national media are suggesting. I think the CDC has flip-flopped so many times, they've really lost credibility. And it's time to take a look at what the numbers were in our own community last year. And I think we can look back and notice that the spread happened in the community, not in our school. If you look back further, there's studies in real life that was not because of masking and social distancing. That was true in real life schools, in real life settings, in real time, even before that. Looking for a little bit of proactivity on these topics coming as well.
Thank you very much.
Chris Vandergoot, 3211 Huron Avery Road. My wife and I moved here from the Northeast approximately 20 years ago. We moved to Huron, Ohio because of the reputation we had heard about the school system, the community. I can honestly say we have never been disappointed in our 20 years here. As an associate college professor, I would encourage the board, when you're thinking of your curriculum and your teachers, what training you're going to provide, stick to your objectives. As a researcher, I have research objectives, I stick to them. The research objectives or objectives of the school should be reading, writing, and arithmetic. These kids should not be having their time compromised or wasted on things that they should be learning at home and under the guidance of their parents. Okay? I interact with undergraduate students on a regular basis for better than 20 years. These kids need to know how to read, write, and do arithmetic. That's what they need to do. As far as it goes to diversity, equity, and inclusion training, as an academic working for both state and federal entities, I've had more trainings than I think all of you probably could put together. Our teachers should be trained that they can spot when there's any type of harassment or anything like that going on, and that there's a clear chain of command on how those issues are handled. As a supervisor, I told my employees, you see something you don't like, you put it in an email and you send it to me, because now it makes me responsible, not you. This is the type of training that the teacher should be getting. Again, if they want to have that training on their own time, that's fine. More power to them. That is their God-given right and a right under our Constitution. And I'm fully supportive of that. But when it comes to education of our children and my children, I want them here to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic so they can be competitive out in the market when they pass through Huron, and so they can be valuable members to society. I would also like to say I applaud the Huron school system for this last year. I had to teach classes remotely from Huron, Ohio to Michigan State students. It's very difficult. I saw my son banging his head against the wall. It wasn't a good situation, and sometimes a lot of people can draw a lot of issues with it, and that's fine. He did a good job, but again, I would like you to consider the comments made here earlier on this is not a good way to go. Our poor students, even at the college level, were besides themselves dropping out of classes. So I would say, come hell or high water, these kids should be able to learn in person and without obstructions, because as I'm looking at your faces right now, I'm able to read the conversation we're having. That's what these poor little kids need, particularly at the younger ages. Thank you for your time.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else like to address the Board of Education at this time? Thank you all for your contributions. Very much. It's an important part of these meetings, and we're grateful. Item 6 on the agenda is a presentation from the City of Huron.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Matt Lasko, City Manager for the City of Huron. I again want to appreciate the board of Huron City Schools for the opportunity to come and speak to an item that's on the agenda this morning, which relates to the school compensation agreement between the City of Huron and Huron Schools as relates to the Sawmill Creek renovations. If nothing else, I hope the board understands and the district understands that the city does not make this request of the school board lightly. We do understand that school compensation agreements and tax increment financing packages do have economic implications and political implications for all those involved. So we're very sensitive to that upon this request. But again, we do believe strongly at the city that this request is beneficial to the school district and all parties involved. I did want to provide a little bit of background as to sort of how we came here today. A couple months ago, Mr. Duff Melke, who is with us today from Cedar Fair, reached out as they were looking to find a way to bring the Sawmill Creek project back online. As we know, pre-pandemic, Cedar Fair was spending a great deal of capital amongst its 13 markets in renovations and new projects across the United States. As the pandemic hit, that ability to spend on capital projects shrunk, and in some instances was eliminated, with the exception of those projects that were already underway and in the pipeline. But as Cedar Fair was coming out of the pandemic, the ability existed to be able to start to spend a few capital dollars across the United States and across the 13 markets that existed. And we wanted to put together a plan to get Sawmill Creek back online. But one of the ways to do that and to make a strong case to Cedar Fair was to find a way to increase the ROI on the project and bring local subsidy to the project. Unfortunately, to be able to bring subsidy of this caliber to the project, it's not something that the City of Huron or also Huron Township can just write a check to the project to be able to get the green light to move that forward.
Matt, can you explain what ROI is for those who might not understand what that means?
Return on it. We needed to put together a strategy in which we felt we could make a compelling case both locally and to Cedar Fair to get this project. And one of the ways to do that, which hasn't really been used within this county, is the idea of what's called a Section 41 TIF, or a tax increment financing package. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the idea of what a TIF is, but historically, they've only been able to be utilized for public infrastructure improvements, roadways, utilities, new public facilities, or acquisition of real estate by public entity. But through what's called a Section 41 TIF, a portion of those new tax revenues from the project can actually be invested into a private project. And in this instance, we felt that about a 10 to 15% subsidy into the project to get the green light from the board to be able to move this project forward immediately. And one of the things I want to be sensitive to and clear on is we're not stating that without this, the project will never move forward. It is possible that a couple years down the line, this project will move forward. But what we know is that if this tax increment financing package is approved, the project will move forward immediately, hopefully be completed in 2022. Now, what has happened since then, since those initial conversations, is that a Section 41 TIF can only be approved by a municipality, a municipal jurisdiction, and not a township. And as we stand here today, Sawmill Creek is within Huron Township. And that is where the idea about an annexation was brought to the table. And as an update to those conversations between the city and Huron Township, I'm happy to report that last week, Huron City Council approved annexation of the property unanimously, 7-0. And also Huron Township has approved the annexation of the property unanimously, 3-0. So really, that was the first major hurdle that needed to be accomplished to get this project sort of towards the finish line. Secondarily is the request that's in front of the school board today, which is the school compensation agreement, which would afford the schools a percentage of the new tax revenues that would come from the project once completed. Get into a few details of the school compensation agreement and the tax increment financing package that again are in front of the board this morning. One thing I want to make clear, the existing tax revenues that are coming from the project will not be touched. Those are sustained as we go forward. The 30-year TIF and the school compensation will only apply to new tax revenues once the project is completed, what they sort of call that increment. The increase from current tax liability versus increased tax liability. What's being proposed is on that increment, 25% of the new revenues generated from the renovations of this project would be reserved for the school district. The other 75% would be restricted to those true traditional public infrastructure improvements. In this instance, primarily focused around improvements around the Cleveland Road, Rye Beach Road intersection. Our conversations with Cedar Fair are almost finalized. We believe that we've got the annual service payment, the new real estate tax liabilities that the project will have to pay, will land somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 a year in new service payments or real estate taxes for the project. Meaning, at 25%, the school will receive an additional $100,000 to $125,000 a year on top of what is already currently used. And just to put that in perspective, we are looking to annex 9 parcels at the project. Those 9 parcels are collectively bringing in just over $190,000 to the district currently. There's an additional 100 to 125 that's going to increase the revenue stream to the school district right around 300,000, just above $300,000. Over the course of 30 years, that's new revenues to the school totaling just under $9 million on the low end of that spectrum. A couple other things I wanted to mention. I know the questions have come up. You know, what if 5 years down the road, the golf course goes away and Cedar Fair wants to look at a new project, a new construction project? What I want to make sure we're clear on is the increment we're talking about, the $400,000 or $500,000, only on the renovations of the conference center and hotel center. If there is a new project done somewhere else on the property, that will be a new revenue stream above and beyond what we're talking about today. So I do think that's an important point. We're really just locking in the revenue stream for the renovations and so on. I do think it's truly important to be able to lock in that revenue stream. As we've seen all throughout the county, property owners all the time are filing board of revision cases to reduce their valuation, to reduce their tax limit. This would lock in that revenue stream for the next 30 years for all parties. With that, I am happy to answer any questions. We truly appreciate the consideration by the board of this request. Again, Mr. Duff, there's questions, Cedar Fair as well. But again, we just appreciate the opportunity for this project. We truly believe this is going to be catalytic, not just for the community, but for the broader county and the region. And we're excited for the opportunity to present this.
Thank you, Mr. Lasko. Does anyone have questions?
I do. I believe we discussed this, Matt, about if for some reason before the 30-year TIF agreement was up, if Cedar Fair decided they wanted to sell that property, that TIF agreement stays in place to whoever would purchase that project or that land. We don't start all over again. That stays in place, correct?
That's correct. There is a development agreement that is entered into between the city of Huron and Cedar Fair that both locks in that service payment for the 30 years, but it's also transferable. Again, meaning the Cedar Fair should sell the property, that new owner is going to be subject to the same obligations for the duration of those 30 years. Absolutely.
I guess my other question would be, you mentioned that the city and Cedar Fair are in negotiations talking about a $400,000 service payment versus a $500,000 service payment, which is significant, $100,000 difference, which is significant to the 25% the schools would receive. When do you anticipate having that negotiation worked out?
I assume that'll be finalized probably within the next 30 days.
Thanks for coming. You actually, during your talk, you answered the questions that I had, so I appreciate that. How soon do you think that will be reasonable? Will the whole agreement be worked out within 30 days? Is that what you're referring to? In other words, when the TIF agreement is in place, her question gets taken care of, and we'll know.
I believe that'll be done within 30 days. I can't promise it'll be legislated, certainly on the city end of it, but the terms of that development agreement should be done. There's several documents and agreements that will need to be undertaken over the next couple months until the finalization of the annexation. But as it relates to the development agreement and finalizing that revenue stream, that'll be over the next 30 days, probably 45 days to actually legislate.
Anyone else? Questions from Mr. Lasko?
I do. So in order for the city and Cedar Fair to finalize this agreement potentially in 30 days, do you need our approval of this? Or are we able to wait for you and Cedar Fair to finalize your pilot or service payment to know what we would actually be receiving, what our 25% would actually be?
To be candid, that's a great question. We'd certainly make the request of the board now, partly because the school district percentage of that service payment is truly what's going to indicate whether this project is a go or a no-go. So even prior to us finalizing the development agreement, candidly finalizing the annexation, which could be a 3 to 4 month process, we need to be ensured that the school district is accepting of, which we believe is a beneficial number, somewhere between $100,000 and $125,000 annually. Because candidly, without this and without this TIF in place, I don't know that we have a project. Part of the TIF proceeds would also go to subsidize the project. So that's truly why we have come to the school board first and want to acknowledge sort of the importance the school district has in this process. I know it's a big ask, but it truly is a sort of a threshold question that we would need to get answered now before we know that there's actually a
Just
Please.
how did 25, 75% become magic equation?
Oh, that's also a great question. Couple things. One, which may or may not mean anything in this room, that is typically in TIF agreements. which are non-school TIF agreements. So those that are actually impacting potential school revenue streams. Just candidly across the board in other jurisdictions, that's a pretty common threshold, if not a little bit less. For example, the city of Sandusky has several TIFs in place with Sandusky schools. Those are actually 10%. So this is more than what is existing locally. Secondarily, the other portions of the revenue stream that would not be going to the schools are going to two other uses. One, subsidy to the project itself. And then secondarily, the critical infrastructure investments that are needed in Cleveland Road, Rye Beach. So knowing what those project expenses are, subsidy needed to the project, we were able to back into that approximate 25% number of those service payments for the school district to ensure that we can get the other projects done.
Cleveland Road, Rye Beach, you're just talking about what's in the city limits. This isn't affecting the change, you know, like the other side, west side.
It would be city limits and township.
It would include the township. Okay.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
Question. Thank you. Anyone else? If not, Mr. Lasker, thank you very much, not only for your presentation and Mr. Milky, your hard work in bringing this before us. I see it as an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7 on the agenda, report from our superintendent.
Thanks. The report this month is short. I anticipate longer reports as the month goes on. What I did want to touch on is the administrative team finished their annual retreat July 7th and 8th, and on the 7th was with Dr. Kitty Brandel, which was over a leadership book that the team was reading throughout the course of the school year, and discussing that, which I sat in for the first part of it and found it very interesting in terms of some strategies and things that we talked about, getting to know each other better and that kind of thing. And then I had another obligation. The second day was my first opportunity to meet with the administrative team and talk. And actually, we did talk because it was about social emotional learning. But let me put this in context of what we discussed. First of all, proactively, I can assure you from my time at the county that through all the areas around your Ottawa, Erie, Huron County, superintendents, even in the throes of COVID last year, were discussing what it's going to look like when it's done in a broad context. In a more narrow context of people that I work with directly in those 4 counties, mainly guidance counselors, we're talking more about what is the mindset of our kids going to be as they return to school after this pandemic, when they've gone a year and a half without seeing their friends. It's different, obviously, with the little ones versus the older kids. So that's been a proactive, very general at this point of discussion. And I think the context that I kind of think of it is when I started doing administration 20 years ago. That was directly post-Columbine. So our discussions at the time were the physical safety of our students, because we didn't have building safety plans. We didn't have ALICE. We didn't have SROs. We didn't have any of that stuff that we do now. So in what we hope or appears to be the post-COVID era, ours is a general discussion of the social safety, if you will, of our students when they get back to the new normal. And it's kind of, I think Julie did a good job. She summarized it in the end. Building relationships is always important. We talked about, we want every one of our students to have somebody in the building, be it the custodian, the lunch lady, the teacher, the administrator, that they can talk to. They might not even have them as a teacher, but maybe somebody they feel comfortable with. When I was my time at the high school, we stressed that every year with our staff. I always felt like it worked very well. There were kids that just connected with other people, mainly based on hobbies and interest in things. But if they felt comfortable with that person, then we knew they had a go-to person if there was something wrong, something bothering them, whatever it may be. We also want to foster that sense of belonging, welcoming everyone back, to the school year, 5 days, new normal education, and be very welcoming in that climate. Also, you know, we have talked again very proactively about, you know, learning recovery, especially among younger students. It's tough to know just exactly what they've missed. And of course, every kid's going to be a little different. That's going to be a factor too. In order to accelerate learning recovery, obviously kids have to feel, you know, comfortable, welcomed in the classroom. And then finally, you know, we want to build resilience in all of our people, our staff and our students. And by resilience, my interpretation of that is just getting back to normal business. You know, the idea of the endurance, a 5-day, you know, 180-day school week. The endurance of, you know, our high school kids being able to go back and see volleyball, football games, prom and things. They haven't done that in a long time. So, and it's not, you know, there's a chance it's not going to be easy. You know, we've had some discussion with counselors. One counselor told me that another high school found it very strange when they did their outdoor prom. She said, it seemed like the high school kids were happy, but they were congregating really small groups versus, you know, every dance we ever had when I was at the high school. It was like a mosh pit, you know. So these are things that are, you know, that we're noticing that aren't typical of what we've seen in the past that we want to deal with through our plan to assimilate, if you will, back to that new normal. We like to see kids, you know, in bigger groups again, and the little ones all crammed in at lunch tables and that. So that was really the gist of our discussion. It took a long time, and I was very pleased with it. And so I thought that that is the, right now being 20 days on the job, that's the key thing that I can share with you. But I will assure you that next month I'll have more. That's really about it. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Questions all? Not at this time? Yeah, thanks. Indeed.
Everybody be kind.
Right.
He's new.
Before we proceed to the treasurer's report, I'd like to sort of interrupt the meeting. And for those of you who came to deliver us a message and have a job to go to, we may be another hour. So if you'd like to leave to go to work, you wouldn't interrupt at this time. If you'd like to stay, you're more than welcome to. Thank you very much. Not you.
Oh, that means I gotta be free for a minute. When we done.
Item 8 on the agenda, treasurer's report. Mr. Treasurer.
I thought everyone's here to see me today. Couple things real quick, and I'll try to make this quick. We ended the year officially at a deficit spending of 669,000 approximately. That's what's officially on the books. Practically, though, we ended up a little over 400,000, so I had to advance almost $250,000 into funds to balance the books for the year, and those advances are returned. It's one of those silly state accounting things that they can't end up in a negative balance. I give them the money for the year, they give it back, and then we get reimbursed by the federal government. It all works out. So we ended up better than forecast slightly, which is good to hear. A couple of things I want to hit on the finances. At the end of June, our total fund balance was a little over $5 million. That sounds like a lot, but and we'll see the general fund, we're down to less than 2 months cash balance. So it's, you know, it's and you can see, I can't see it. Our cash balance in the general fund is 3.6 million. So, you know, divide that, by the number of days, and, you know, it's where we expect to be at this time of year until we get our first tax advance in July and so forth. Investments, I want to show you real quick. Because of our cash situation, as investments mature, I'm pulling back our investments. So right now, As we know, Star Ohio Plus is no longer in existence. It could not make enough money to make it worthwhile. We had some money with Morgan Stanley that's pulled back, and eventually, I'm guessing the next year, most of our money will be back into Star Ohio. That's liquid for me. I can move money, make payroll each week out of there, and so you know, 2 years ago we made almost $100,000 in interest. Last year we made 10,000. Okay, that's the order of magnitude of what's happening with us on interest rates. The last thing I'll show you is just where we ended the year. Let's see if I can zoom this up a little bit. So we, on this revenue, we ended up the year at 99.6% of forecast, and expenses 98.5% of forecast. So right there. And the main change is that we had some increase in personal property, public utilities personal property that I had not expected. And then we got that partial restoration state funding that was not expected to be in the year that helped us on the revenue side. And on the expense side, some of the things we've done on cutting staff, we saw that salary and benefits, we watched supplies, we watched our capital spending. So we're being, being as frugal as we can at this point. And we'll have an update on that. Next thing I want to kind of go over, and frankly, part of my mission is to communicate, help prepare the board to deal with, community discussions, right? We have a levy coming up. We've got the school compensation agreement, and some of this you know, but I thought it'd be worthwhile. We have a tremendous tool in this community with the our county auditor's website. I just want to show you a couple things on the website that may be useful for you as people bring questions to you. So let me first start on the property search side. I'm going to do a search here for Sawmill for obvious reasons. No agenda there. You can notice here, these are all the parcels that are under Sawmill Creek LLC. The parcels that, for the most part, that Matt was talking about all start with lot number 39. Huron City, Huron Schools, and Huron Township. So you can tell a parcel belongs to us, and we see that 39 in front of it. The main parcel we're talking about, there's 9 parcels. The big one is the parcel where the current resort is, right? And I know you can't, I got to go as far as I can, but the current annual taxes from that parcel is $207,000. That's for everyone that gets property taxes. We're only a portion of that, right? Now we're 68% of that, but it's township gets some money from that, county, and so forth, public libraries. So that's the total revenue currently from that particular parcel. There's other parcels involved. The other piece I want to show you is on the valuation side, because this is where people get confused. That parcel right now is appraised at $9.78 million. And that means, so 35% of that is assessed value. So it's 3.1 million, 3.4 million. So that's what $200,000 revenue is based on that. When Sawmill, when Cedar Fair bought the property, we challenged that assessment a little bit, but the place needs so much work, COVID hit, and they agreed not to try to get a board reduction. And I'm happy with it. That's kept our revenue there. And Matt's point is that revenue is set, right? Going forward, we've got that set revenue. So that's an important thing to know. The second thing I want to show you is this. It's probably one of the worst kept secrets here. Anyone can go in and look at the tax rate sheet. This is what the sheet looks like. I'm coming down to Huron Township. You see, I don't know if you can see it or not, 39. That goes that first 2 numbers in the parcel, right? So those are parcels in Huron Township, the Huron City Schools. And you can see in Huron Township, Edison has a little bit, and so does Perkins, for example. But if you come out, you come read across here, you look at the counties, these are all the millages. So 7.6 county, 73.13 are the total mills for school levy on those parcels. That's voted millage. It's not the effective millage. I'll show you that here in a second. That's been voted over the years as the total millage. And then you got public library and township and some other things. The total voted millage on those parcels is almost 92 mills. The effective mills, and this is class 1, so it's agriculture and residential, is a little less than 47. And of that, 60% of it is schools, about 30 mills of that schools, and also includes the bond issue for the public library is in there. That kind of inflates it a little bit too. So when someone asks about what the tax rates are, and you can see, and then class 2 is a little over 60. So class 2 would be commercial and industrial. Right? We don't have a lot in the district. We do have some, obviously. It's what's happening in the industrial park, and this will be class 2, right? It'll be a commercial project. So when someone wants to compare tax rates, you can see, for example, within Huron Township, we're not any higher, than anyone else. So those two pieces of information can help put the story together for you. And so any questions on that? I just want to equip you with these tools are out there. There's a lot more I want to show you, but we're running into it. Mr. Ward ran into it with a taxpayer who's moved in the area, didn't understand his taxes. We were able to show him that he was actually paying less taxes here than he was where he came from. He thought he was paying more. But if you can pull up his real estate in his previous district and here go, no, your tax bill's less and your tax rate's less. So I just want to show you that. So that's really all I have there. Anyone else have any other questions? Hopefully this is helpful. Just want to give you a little tidbit of information on that.
Thank you very much. Understanding effective millage is a key to understanding why school districts, particularly in the state of Ohio, have to go to the voters for levies on occasion and for new money. Whereas, for example, city government for its police and fire and the way that and state government don't have to. The school districts are in a unique spot.
Yes, that's the point. Notice the 92 down to 46. That's reduction in millage for the school, right? Because as the property values go up, our effective millage is going to drop because we can't collect any more. Like the permanent improvement levy, when it was passed in 1986, was like 3 mills. It's collected at 1 mill today, right? And it'll keep dropping because we can't collect any more than what was collected in 1986. That ends that little thing. Let me blow things real quick. I'm going to ask you to accept the acceptance of grants. We do that annually. That's our initial allocation from our federal and state grants. Those allocations could change, but in order for me to create the funds and stuff, I'm asking you to do that. Purpose and budget statements. Those are from our student activities. Again, the advisors and the coaches submit them. That's their budget. If it's in that budget, they can essentially go execute that without further approvals. If they want to do something other than that, they got to get additional approvals on that. Superintendent search, I just need a little feedback from the board. I'm starting to get inquiries, and I haven't reached out to anyone yet, but do you want me to go ahead and start building proposals, asking for proposals from people? And I know there's a community participation that you wanted to have in that. I just need some guidance on what you want me to ask for. You don't have to tell me now if you want to talk, if you want to just think about it. There's no purpose.
You're talking specifically about working with entities such as OSBA, North Point, ESC.
Finding leaders, K-12. I've got a couple other ones who called me who are executive search firms. Again, what I want to do is provide them information like you want a community input. What does that look like? Does that mean, is that building the criteria for the superintendent? Is that, interviewing? What is that you want in that? So they can build it in their proposals.
Doesn't the OSBA have a good program that we could just talk to them, let them explain how they typically do their things and listen to how the different steps they take as a template?
Well, the thing yes, you can, Scott. What I was concerned about is you're talking about a range in price, right?
Right.
North Point is traditionally done free.
Right.
So you don't know if the scope is there. OSBA tends to be at the lower end. Finding leaders, K-12 and others, there's a range there. And you want to make sure you're getting the value for your money. OSBA has their process. That is correct.
I'm a big fan of North Point. But I thought there was some interest last conversation we had about engaging one of those other entities.
That's why I want to get proposals written proposals, not take
Yeah.
their time of the
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, I can't think of a reason why the treasurer can't begin that process immediately. Is there,
So the really question is, on the front end, how much community, what do you really think the community involved? Because that's the part that they don't normally, they may or may not normally do, right? Normally they come in with you and meet with you and say, what's your criteria? Put that search together. But if you want to have a community input into that, how do you think that might look? Or do you want them to define how that might look? That's either way. That's why little guides trying to give them some direction, so
Sure.
we don't waste anyone's time. But you can think about it, we'll talk about next month. I just want to plant that seed.
very good. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Capital Conference is November 7th and 9th. I put it, you'll see my email. I've heard from Mr. Jones. Anyone who's planning to attend, please let me know. I'll get your registration in. And if you're looking to stay overnight in Columbus, I need to know that too. And no guarantee on getting close rooms, we'll do our best. I just need to go. And the last one related to that is Mr. Jones was appointed as our delegate, but we need an alternate delegate. And I know it really only needs a volunteer, Mr. You're the vote for anyone, but someone wants to be the alternate. Mr. Jones can't make it. Mr. Jones is planning on attending, by the way. I'm not speaking for
I
him.
don't
So,
recall.
We just did a delegate.
We didn't do it
Yeah.
all, we didn't do an alternate.
Anyone like to be an alternate delegate? Would you like to?
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy
Okay,
to
so-
volunteer to be that.
Mrs. Mass.
I read everyone dies.
Afterwards, I got something for you guys to sign. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the same category. Yeah,
That's all I
Thank
have,
you.
unless there's any questions.
excellent. Any questions for the treasurer? Thank you for your report very much. Item 10 on the agenda, or excuse me, item 9 on the agenda. Caught myself. Treasurer recommendations.
Item A is just our monthly financial reports as I've presented and sent to you. Item B, actually approval on the donations. We had 2 donations, totaling $2,600 that went for a Lions scholarship and a football scholarship. Item C, somewhat lengthy. Remember back in June, I said, hey, trust me, give me the authority to advance money into these grant funds. And I'll tell you what I did in July. So I'm telling you what I did. All these grants, I transferred this money. They've all been transferred. They're advances, excuse me. So I'm loaning the money for the close of the year out. They've returned the money. So these have all been returned back to the general fund. And I want to point out, ESSER 2, 140,000. That's one of the biggest problems with these federal grants. The next one, ESSER 3, we have $1 million. We got to spend it and then wait for reimbursement, right? So sometimes it can be difficult. Food service, we ended the year having to transfer just shy of 39,000, and I advanced 63,000, waiting for our final payment, which we received today finally. So that money had been advanced, and food service is now whole. Athletics, the first time in a long time, we had to transfer into the general athletic fund lower, almost 17,000, and transfer into the state tournament account, only 600. Reason for the transfer in the state tournament account is because the Ohio High School Athletic Association no longer reimburses us for athletes who participate at the state level. So normally we'd get money back. It would cover a lot of those expenses. We don't anymore. So great thing of having a volleyball team go to state, track people who go to state is it increases the athletic bill. And there's no, in that case, there's no funding source for that except to come out of general fund. You know,
That's in addition to a new little fee they attach, right?
Right.
So, yeah,
It's something to be aware of. Now, in a normal year, if the attendance can be what it is at the stadium and stuff, we probably don't sweat this as much. So I'm hoping this is an abnormality and we get on with life and have decent revenues. Item F is the new fiscal year grants. These are initial allocations. We are down slightly in Title I, and our special education is about the same, but the non-publics will get more of it. So I could say that correctly, Holly? Yeah, so while the total is about the same, the Huron itself will get a little bit less because grant money's going to Montessori and St. Peter's comes to us. Item G are those budget purpose statements for all these high school, junior high, principals funds. We've got them. There'll be more trickling. This is the big bulk at once. These allow me, by the way, to actually do their budgets inside the state software once I get there, because that's what they provide in the budget. Item H is the class of 2021 ended their Huron career with a little over $3,000 in their fund balance. I ask you to approve the transfer of that funds to high school building fund, which will be used to help the next senior class. So the money, stays helping students. Those are Mr. Lamb's principal's fund that he can use for graduation and that kind of thing. And the last one is an information only item is contracts. Remember, you authorize superintendent treasurer to approve contracts that are less than a year in duration and $50,000, but with stipulation that we provide those to you for your information every month. And these are those contracts. So I went fast, but any questions on that? Mostly, obviously, routine business.
Questions for the treasurer on any of his recommendations? We have a motion.
So moved?
Second.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Mass.
Yes.
Mr. Jones. Yes. Mrs. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Slocum. Yes. Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 10, superintendent recommendations.
Subject day, I'm thrilled to, even though I haven't met her, to add Christy, I hope I say your name right, Taraski, to our 7-9 counselor. Is she out there? Hi. You stand up. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So, talked about in the superintendent's report, counselors have always been key to our our kids. We just added another one, and I think that's terrific. Item B, recommendation to approve Amy Lauer's transfer from part-time to full-time intervention specialist. This is based on need. Going too fast, slow me down. Item C is to recommend to approve the Summer Learning Institute participation.
This isn't just an update. You approve this once, we end up doing more this summer. So
Thank you.
And item D, I'm also thrilled to introduce to you Taylor Dunn, who is going to be grades 7 through 8 STEM. Taylor, stand up, please.
Welcome aboard.
Item E is to recommend the approval of Wilbur Newell for head custodian at Woodlands Intermediate School. I believe Mr. Newell is in the audience as well. Did he have to leave to go to work? He went to work. That's great. All right. So Mr. Newell, I think he was here earlier, but he is hard at work. All the custodians are getting the schools ready for fall. Item F is to recommend to improve the intent to retire letter from Ken Walters, who does it all for us. And I saw Ken yesterday, and I'm sorry to see him go. I'm happy for his retirement. But I will miss him. I think the district will miss him.
one more year. With a year's notice, they'll get the last lap.
Stellar employee. Item G is to recommend to approve Jennifer Johnson for Tigers Kids Club for the 21-22 school year. Item H is to recommend to approve substitutes for Shawnee Elementary for Brian Kuzbell, principal. You can see the list of names below. Item I is to recommend to approve substitutes for this coming school year for Denise Zilski. Again, you can see the list of names on that. Item J, to recommend for approval supplemental for IST coach at Woodlands Intermediate for Mr. Dowdy, the principal. See the name attached to that. Item K, recommend to approve supplementals for Woodlands Intermediate School for Mr. Dowdy, yearbook advisor. Item L is to recommend to approve academic supplementals for McCormick Junior High for Mr. Carter. And you can see the list of people on that. All typical what we've done in the past. Item N is to recommend to approve supplementals for Huron High School per Mr. Lamb. Those individuals are also listed below. Item N is to recommend to approve resignation notification of Deborah Hassenmeyer effective July 30th, 2021. Item O is to recommend to approve Marcia Sheehan for Shawnee Cashier per Mrs. Zilski. See that. Item P, recommend to approve Richard Oberfell for second shift custodian at Woodlands for Mrs. Zilski. Is Richard out there? Welcome. Item Q, recommend to approve step increase for the executive assistant to the superintendent. Item R is to recommend to approve athletic supplementals per Mr. Camella, athletic director for the 2021 school year. You can see the list, the high school list, junior high, biddy, ticket takers, and timers, clock runners, scorers, and announcers. All on. Item S is to recommend to approve athletic volunteers. You can see that list, and we appreciate those individuals and their volunteer work to help us out in the athletic department. And that looks like we are to the end of 10. Any questions over any of those before the vote?
Motion to approve under superintendent recommendations, items A through S.
So moved. Second?
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Mass,
Yes.
Mr. Slocum. Yes. Mr. Jones. Yes. Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 11, school breakfast and lunch prices for 2021, 2022.
And this is based on the recommendation from Mrs. Zilski on lunch prices. As Mr. Ward just said, for the upcoming 21-22 school year, you can see the breakdown of it below.
It's up in nickel, right? But 5 cents. But we are again under the nutrition program for the year, so everyone get meal free if they say so choose, right? And that's, by the way, that is a boon for us. We'd be in much more bigger trouble in the cafeteria if we didn't have that.
Perfect. Questions about the school lunch?
Do you anticipate that program will end 2022 at some point, or?
To be honest, I was surprised that they just moved with it, that this school year, but it was so the reimbursement of 100% for practicing lunch procedures. But I look forward to end it this year. We originally said that we were going to have it through December of last year, depending on how the program had, but it's nice that they extended it.
In this summer, we did not have the program that was providing lunches during the summer, correct?
Program this year, I sent a survey out to parents to see what participation interest was, and to be honest, I didn't that really at all. I think people have to be outside, and you know, they didn't want to be rigid and having those up or have those delivered.
Great. Yep. Thanks.
Question. Motion to approve?
So moved? Go ahead. I'll second.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Jones. Yes. Mrs. Mass,
Yes.
Mr. Slocum. Yes. Mrs. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 12, payment in lieu for transportation.
Recommended that approve the following people listed below for payment in lieu of transportation. This was given to us by Mrs. Charville. There's 4 individuals.
Discussion? Motion.
So moved. Second?
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Mass,
Yes.
Mr. Slocum. Yes. Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 13, science curriculum.
It's recommended you adopt the science curriculum that Mrs. McDonald attached on here, that's been worked on over the last year plus.
Questions or discussion?
So was this a lot of changes?
That I am aware of, no, but Julie obviously is on vacation and she can answer more in depth some of those questions when she gets back. Class wise, no. You know, when I looked at the classes, they were attached.
Anyone else? Mr. Motion,
So moved.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Mass,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Slocum.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 14, recommendation to approve student handbooks.
As always, every year, the board's asked to approve the student handbooks from the 4 buildings. Really, most of the changes were cosmetic in nature in terms of some names and titles. Obviously, the biggest change, I believe I put it in the superintendent's report, was in grades 7 through 12. There's a policy that does not allow students to use cell phones during classroom time. This was brought up and recommended by me based on the fact, really 2 facts. Number one, we now have, proud to say, we're one-on-one with Chromebooks for our 7 through 12 students. So those educational technology needs can be done through the Chromebook, not the cell phone. And number 2, you know, teachers and things that I had been hearing, it'll become more of a distraction than a benefit. What I like about the policy is when you read it, it's a policy put in place to educate kids to be responsible users of cell phones. It's not punitive. It's a fair policy because they can use it between classes. They can use their cell phones at lunch, study hall, before, after school. So this is something that we have it in place policy-wise. And like everything else, now we have to work it, force it, and there'll be a couple bumps along the way. I don't think anybody's out to hammer anyone right off the bat with this thing, but we'll get it in place and make sure that we're focused with our one-on-one during classroom. I just wanted to clarify that because that's the biggest change. Everything else, again, pretty much.
Mr. Ruff and I had an email back and forth concerning before school use. There had been some concern from parents about the fact that we are not busing high school students and that there will be junior high students on the buses with kindergarten, maybe preschool, but kindergarten and younger. And what are the ramifications of improper use on the bus of a cell phone towards a younger student? If somebody decides to put something in the face of a younger student that is inappropriate, and he said that same discipline action would be carried out as if they were using it in class,
right,
inappropriately.
Probably, depending on the circumstance, more severe, because you would be looking at an offense more than an inappropriate use of cell phone. Depending on what it was, you probably are feeding in harassment or menacing or who knows, repeated violation of school rules, inappropriate conduct. So and again, that would depend on the individual case, but something like that, almost 99% of the time feeds into other offenses as a little bigger problem. So
Yeah,
it'd be
and-
dealt with
right.
accordingly.
Right, and I appreciate, I mean, it, like you told me, it is difficult for the bus driver who is
Yeah,
focusing on the road and
Right.
everything else and safety to monitor what's happening behind him or her with cell phone, and those seats are extremely high, so you can't really see what's going on anyways, but that will be addressed, because I know that has been a concern
Yeah.
of parents, what's gonna be shoved in my kid's face when they get on the bus with these older students.
and again, it goes back to that all that stuff is a teachable moment as well. Even when you implement the discipline, you want to emphasize, we don't throw a camera in the face of a second grader and think it's funny when the flashball looks something.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm confident that we will be able to handle.
And I appreciated your email response
not a
to my
problem.
question.
Any other questions on it?
Item 14, without further discussion, a motion.
So moved. Second?
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Mass.
Yes.
Mr. Slocum.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 15, resolution to proceed with an emergency tax levy.
This is item A, approval of the resolution to proceed. This is the emergency.
Yes, this is the 5.6 mil property tax discussion. Motion first? Let's do it that way then. Thank you, Scott. Okay,
Second.
thank you.
I have a question. Have we secured or know of someone who is willing to head the levy committee at this point, as of today?
We know of someone who is who is committed to working on the committee, who has a vast knowledge of levy committees, who's actually passed a levy as a superintendent in another district. Actually, I think their commitment is waiting to see that we approve the levy. And then this individual would also like a co-chair. We also have some names of, and then they will fully commit to be the chair. So we're very close, but I can't tell you that the individual has 100% committed. I will tell you that we met with him, and boy, he has 6 pages of notes, and we have about, I think, close to 100 names for a levy committee.
Good question, important question, maybe the most important one at this point. Anyone else?
I just like the fact that appears that we're going to have a more vocal or more involved committee than we've had in the past. And obviously, the other benefit to us is that at least currently we don't have the restrictions that we had last year for the mail election. They can actually go door to door if they want or have group meetings.
Right.
So it appears to be a lot more positive overall to get a number of people involved. I mean, I'm looking forward to working with them. I've had the pleasure of talking with them also.
Anyone else? Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Slocum. Yes. Mrs. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Mass.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 16 is the earned income tax that we have discussed. We bounced around. Motion?
So moved. A second.
Discussion?
This item, we're making this move.
It does.
Let's not put both of them on.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, we don't want to put both of them on. We now have the opportunity to vote an up or down on this one. I would assume we would all vote down. From my own perspective, talking to folks, there's just absolutely no taste for an income tax.
And John just asked a question. Parliamentary wise, you got a motion and a second on the floor. You have to act on it.
Right.
Unless the motion and second is withdrawn, and then you can table. So.
Right. Yeah, we just have to vote. Right. Anyone else have anything to say about this one?
I'm kind of like you, just talking with a few people and just, there's no taste for it. So,
The interesting thing with this is economically, it's probably the best option for the bulk of the taxpayers in Huron. But rationality out the door, emotionally, this is not, it's probably not going to fly.
And there's just not, it's just something we're not used to. And there's, anyway, how many districts in the state even do them? Very small number of people in the state do them. There's just the unknown scares people.
This income tax works best when you got high valuation, low income,
Yes.
right? Or relatively high valuation, low income. So typically agriculture.
Yes.
They got all their assets are tied up in land.
Right. And that's not how we're oriented agriculturally.
Yeah, the difference here is that the amount of probably fixed income or retirement income. I won't say fixed retirement income, which would not be taxed. That's the difference. Where not necessarily low income, just you're just not getting paychecks.
Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Green.
No.
Mr. Jones.
No.
Mrs. Mast.
No.
Mr. Slocum.
No.
Mr. Ward.
No.
In my time in school, it's the first time I've had a
I
5 number.
I was just thinking the same
It's kind of interesting, kind of cool, actually.
Item 17 on the agenda is the school compensation agreement. This is relative to the city's presentation today. Is there a motion?
Move.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, I'm honestly a bit uncomfortable approving this without knowing exactly what the numbers are that the city and Cedar Fair are agreeing upon. Because that is, it's $100,000 difference for the city, it's $25,000 difference for us. I would be more comfortable knowing what exactly the numbers are. I also am, I guess, a firm believer that if this is the offer, do we have the ability to negotiate something different as far as percentages? Something different than the 75-25%. Those are my thoughts.
Anyone else? Thoughts? I respect the concern. We don't have a crystal ball. And I'm reminded of the old show, and I'm going to date myself. Let's make a deal. What they presented us is the week in Hawaii. And what might be behind the curtain is either the new Buick or the GOAT, but we don't know. We don't anticipate, or we can't anticipate future fluctuations in commercial property value. So if we reject this deal, which amounts to a little in excess of 50% growth in revenue nearly immediately of what we now have. Mr. Treasurer, am I accurate? At a time when we need it most. So I'm looking at it as a bird in the hand proposition. Notwithstanding Mrs. Mast's remarks, could we negotiate a better deal? I don't know, is my answer to that question. I just know on the table is a 50% increase in revenue at a time when we're going to the voters for help. So you can look at this different ways. So we reject an offer. Boy, it doesn't look good in an attempt to negotiate a better deal. Or we accept it and have an infusion of cash. 2023, Mr. Treasurer?
Yeah, that's the timeline. They complete in 2022, we'd see it in 2023.
I also see this as an opportunity to be a partner, an agreeable neighbor to Cedar Fair Limited Partnership. I've got a hunch there's going to be a moment in the future when an entity, I don't know, let's say the Huron Booster Club approaches such an entity and saying, can you help us? I have a concern about going to them and asking for their help a year or two after we say no deal on your offer. So that's on my mind as well. But obviously, first and foremost, we've got to maximize all opportunities for the students of our school district.
I don't know per se, you said, to not accept the deal. I guess in my mind, I would rather have the ability to table the discussion
Mhm.
until we have more information as to the settlement between the city and Cedar Fair. I don't know that I would say 100% not accept this agreement, but is there the ability to table it until we know more of the story?
One thing too, if I heard Mr. Lasko right, it'd be 100,000 at 25% or more. I didn't hear them say less. It could have been maybe less. That might be more of a reason to wait. But it can only go up, not down from the original 100. That makes
No, I understand that. No, I absolutely 100% understand that. But I guess in my mind, I guess I'd rather have more concrete figures. And I guess I've always been of the mindset that you never accept your first deal ever in negotiating or in business. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, we're in a bit of a pinch because if I also understood Mr. Lasko correctly, concluding the negotiations is largely dependent on our approval of the parameters currently. So if we wait for them, they're waiting for us. And if we wait for them, I don't know what that impact will be. But I wouldn't be out of hand opposed to waiting. I'm not sure it will benefit us.
I'm hearing already from when I asked Mr. Lasko, the 75-25 is not necessarily the norm. This is, as far as we've been told, is better. Well, I don't know, better than the majority or better than many other. You say 10% is usually 90. Sure, it's all right with me if it's sure.
Thank you very much. And as mentioned, I'm glad this discussion is happening. I think my first sentence was, we don't make this request lightly. We know that there's major ramifications to this request. In terms of Mr. Jones's question, two recent examples I just want to bring up. 2 weeks ago, on the front page of the Sandusky Register, there was a tax increment financing deal that was entered into between the O'Griffe family that owns the Cook Building, Sandusky Schools, and the city of Sandusky. And that project, the schools agreed to 12.5% of the new revenue stream. This would be double that. And several other TIF agreements that recently occurred in the city of Sandusky, whether that's a sports center project, or also there's a downtown TIF that covers multiple projects downtown. That was 10%. School district, city of Sandusky School District. The other question that came up, and here would just be my concern and Cedar Fair's concern, if we agree to a minimum service payment first, without locking in what percentage would go to the schools, the balance of that service payment is to go into infrastructure and a subsidy to the project. So if we agree to that minimum service payment, but then the percentage that goes to the schools increases, it reduces that revenue stream to be able to move forward with the project that was originally thought and to pay for and build infrastructure improvements. So that's the concern about agreeing to a minimum service payment, not knowing what percentage is pledged to the school district. If I can just.
And as Mr. Rupp pointed out, it's not going to get lower. If nothing else, it could be higher. So just sounds like the win.
I think in the 16 years that I've sat on board, when we've given tax abatements, which I know is a little different from a TIF, but when Kalahari came in, kind of, even though they were at the Dells, a little bit of an unknown quantity, we knew, I'll still refer to it as Glidden. They've changed their name so many times. Moochie's, a little bit of an unknown commodity. We know Cedar Fair. I have tremendous respect for Cedar Fair and their prominence in our county and what they have done for the residents of our county, not just specifically our school district. And I just feel like that's a known commodity that we can work with through the years that will be beneficial to the city and to the school district. So
Good points. Anyone else? Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mrs. Green,
Abstain, because I have a lot of Cedar Fair stock.
Mrs. Mast,
No.
Mr. Slocum,
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Item 18 is board committee reports. Anyone have a report to submit? Or a liaison report?
Just want to say, Hobie's kind of doing the same thing we are, getting their buildings spruced up and following everything that's going on as far as what they want to look like when they go back to school. I appreciated Mrs. LaFay's comments about the pandemic and, what we're all hoping school looks like this fall. And, Hobie's kind of in the same boat. So if any of you haven't been out there, they are doing in Building A, which is where their cafeteria is. They've taken out a classroom and enlarged, instead of like 4, now they're down to 3 so that there's more rooms. Kids are bigger now. The kind of stadium style seating they had, kids didn't really fit in it anymore. So they've been redoing that all summer, and they're looking at adding a couple new program areas. I think one which will be of value is HVAC. We have quite a need for that. People that are trained in heating, air conditioning, that trade set. So that's where they're at right now.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Green.
Just have from the safety standpoint, I just met with Ms. Zilski again yesterday, and just am happy to say that we're moving on with the project to add bike rack for 36 outside the stadium. So instead of having the bikes laying all over the grass and Mrs. Green's wonderful landscaping, hopefully they'll utilize those, and that'll be safer for them and for us.
Indeed.
And they're going to do some lights too.
I believe the lights have already been readjusted, correct? And the one out.
It's good. It's dark out there when you come out.
Yeah.
Security lights, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, just
near
a
the
motion
stadium?
light or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, it has seemed pretty dark to me.
Mr. Mills replaced the light or the bulb or something. I can't remember what he did. And moved it from behind the tree or something. Good, I appreciate that.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Jones. Anyone else?
A housekeeping thing. I noticed in the list, I don't think I updated from our January organization meeting. Just, there was a couple little changes, like Judy Knight basically flip-flopped Education Foundation and the Parks and Rec.
I'll check. I just got copies. With board docs, when we had copies of the meeting from whatever. You run it once in a while, I have to go in and change board members. So we'll check that.
That's right. And school safety is strictly Mr. Jones, not including me. Okay,
Thank you.
certainly. Good catch. Anyone else? Item 19, new business. Does anyone have new business before the board? Hearing none. Item 20, the next meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. This will be the last of our summer morning meetings. Sir.
Good, based on the fact that we are now going to put the levy on the ballot. We've talked about the levy committee. I would like to propose a work session prior to August 17th, so that the levy committee can come in and present to the board in detail, what we're going to look like, what the subcommittees are going to be. And I'd like to talk to Mrs. Zilski and Mr. Lamb. I'd like to hold that meeting at the high school so we could, prior to it, open the doors to the gym for our community. Since we have the donor, an anonymous donor that donated upgrades for the gym, you can take a quick tour of the gym. Take a look at the cafeteria. It's not completed, but it's been painted. And by that point, the press box, if anybody wants to hike up the stairs in the stadium, will be done too. So we can take a look at those improvements, invite everybody from the community in. And if they'd like to stay for our work session, that'd be great too.
Thank you. I have a restriction against walking up that amount of stairs.
You're not allowed, are you? You ate a salad yesterday.
Right. You have a date in mind, Mr. Superintendent?
I was, August 4th, I believe that's a Wednesday. I need to check my calendar. And that is, I'm sorry, August 3rd, which is a Tuesday. Equal for Tuesdays. Yeah, August 4th is our administrative team meeting we're having. But August 3rd, again, maybe given the heat in August, we could also do it, at 8 a.m.
I'll be out of the state.
Likewise.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get in there too before Coach Wood puts down his volleyball for me.
How's the?
Do you know what date that is?
Is a Friday okay?
Friday would work.
August 6th?
6th.
Back Wednesday night.
8 a.m.
Yeah, that does work for me.
That works well.
Good.
Says I'm out at 8 a.m. I'm where I'm out at. I'm out. That's on the 6th?
August 6th.
I'll have to figure out what that means. I'm good.
And where would that be at the Tiger? Oh, no, the cafeteria?
Well,
Where would?
depending on the temperature, could be down the Tiger Union is what I'm
You
thinking.
just let us know.
Yeah, that's air conditioned, a little more comfortable for everyone, but we'll take the tour prior. It was August 6th. Okay.
At the August 6th, 8 a.m. at the high school.
Yeah.
You'll advise us exactly where?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, next meeting, actually, next regularly scheduled meeting is August 17th, 2021 at 8 a.m. We will meet regarding the levy and a special meeting at the high school, August 6th, Friday, 8 a.m. Meeting up, vote, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Tired. I need another cup of coffee. I have the authority, but let's do it the right way, Mr. Chair. Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Treasurer.
Mrs. Mass.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Slocum.
Yes.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Meeting adjourned.
Still saying this.
Oh, 9:45, and Joe